Okay, well, hello again, everyone. My name is Patrick Gierot. I am the current president of CHART, which is the Council of Hotel and Restaurant Trainers. I'd like to welcome you to our latest Second Wednesday webinar, which, as the name implies, takes place on the second Wednesday of every second month. For today's session, we have one of our CHART board members, Gabe Hostler, from Rubio's Restaurants, with a presentation titled Email, There's a Right Way to Do It. During the presentation, you in the audience will be muted, but if you have any questions, there's a chat box on the control panel down towards the bottom. You can use that to send in questions or if you need clarification on anything, and then I will make sure to relay that to Gabe. We'll take a lot of questions towards the end, but if there's anything pressing, we can interrupt Mr. Gabe and get clarification right away. So, Gabe, if you're ready, why don't you go ahead and take it away.
Excellent. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for logging in today. It's a real honor to have an opportunity to speak to so many wonderful CHART members and some of our visitors as well. So just to set this up, I'm going to share quite a few best practices that we've put together within my organization and our training team to aid in email communication to make it more efficient. I promise you all that, first and foremost, I guarantee you I have been an offender and still offend on several of the faux pas that I'll cover today. And that's okay because I'm committed to improving, and I'm sure many people out there will probably be nodding their heads and giggling that you're probably offenders of some of these things as well. And I will tell you right up front that some of the best practices I share, I guarantee you some of them might not work for you in your organization, and that's okay. That's why they're best practices. So ultimately, my commitment to everyone here today is that I guarantee everybody is going to leave today with some type of aha best practice that you can take back for yourself or a member of your team to make email communication just a little bit more efficient on your group. I mean, I know Patrick mentioned it already, but you're more than welcome to submit questions down into the chat box. We'll do some question and answer at the very end of the call that Patrick will facilitate. But if throughout the session, if there's any questions that are super pressing that you'd really just like to get answered right away, just let Patrick know in your chat. Just say, hey, can you ask this now? And he is more than welcome to chime in and ask questions. So let's get started. Jumping right into this, I wanted to share a little fun trivia with you guys. So I promise I'm not getting political here, but this is actually from the Spirit magazine for those of you who fly Southwest. During Bill Clinton's presidency, he only sent 2 emails the entire time. And again, we could debate all day long whether he was or was not an effective president. That's not what we're talking about today. But if you read there in the little note, 40 million emails circulated in the White House during his time as president. So just imagine the most effective or even the most ineffective person within your organization. Just imagine being able to sideline and be able to only send 2 emails. So I thought that was a little funny. When you think about in our organizations today, the amount of email that's flying is probably tripled and doubled, and just imagine trying to relegate yourself down to only 2 and still be the commander-in-chief of the entire country. I'm sure you're all giggling and laughing right now. That's why you're on mute, though, so I don't have to understand the uncomfortable laughter. All right, going into the actual details of today, we're actually going to cover 5 topics throughout our session today, and we'll spend the bulk of our time on the first few topics. So getting into it first, we're going to talk about the desired result of email communication, the 4 W's of email communication, responding to email, getting an answer to your email, and your e-commitment. We're going to spend the bulk of our time actually on the 4 W's, but there's 5 different areas that are going to go through today that we'll break down. So jumping right into it, let's talk about the desired result of email. Give you a little bit of an example of an email you may have sent before. Your email with message, I have a question for you. Please call me for details. What's the usual response you typically get for something like this? None. A better example, I have a question for you about ABC. I'd like to speak to you by phone. Are you available at 3 p.m. on Friday? If not, please let me know by Tuesday what time it'll work for you. So we're going to use these examples throughout the webinar today to kind of paint the picture of the types of things that can make an email more effective. So what's the best way for you to determine if email is the best communication form for you to use? So, because email is just one type of communication that you can use within your organization. And I think sometimes we tend to lean on it a lot in this environment that we live in. So there's some questions you can ask yourself to determine, hey, is this the right format that I should be using to communicate within my team? So first and foremost, by when do I need a response or action? Is this something that I need to know right away, or is this something that, hey, is a few days down the road? And you think to yourself, if this is something I need an hour or two, ask yourself, is the receiver somebody who's going to get to this right away and be able to get me the answer by when I need it? Does this require back and forth dialogue? I think we can all think about other tools, i.e. the telephone or in-person meetings that are much more conducive to back and forth dialogue. I know even chat functions are becoming more and more popular within organizations. Is the question complicated, or will the answer be complicated? I know we've probably all gotten that phone call, hey, I was going to put this in an email, but it was way too confusing, so I just gave you a call. That person did the right thing. We think about email chains that just go on and on and on. So we got to ask ourselves this question before we send that email. Who am I communicating with, and is this the most effective method for them? I look across my team, and I can tell you right off the bat which members on my team tend to be the guys that really enjoy the email communication, and that's perfect and functional for them. And then there's the person on my team that a text or a phone call is much more efficient. But asking yourself these questions, they'll ultimately lead to, is email my best choice? Now, once we're going to jump into it, we're going to now assume that email is our best choice, and we're going to go into what's the desired result of email communication. The goal of effective email communication is there's really three pieces to this. We want specific individuals to receive information that is correct, clear, and concise. Specific individuals receive information from me before or at least by when they need it. And lastly, others who need to know what I'm saying get the information that they need. And ultimately, the desired result here of all email communication is to exchange information and break the chain. I think within our organization we're represented by tons of hospitality groups here today, hotels and restaurants, and even some other visitors today. I think if we were in the business of creating email chains, I'm sure you're all nodding your heads that we would probably be Fortune 500 companies. You can think about the members within your organization and you think that their sole function was to create email chains. So our goal today is to talk about how we just want to exchange the information and break the chain. That's all we're working on. So that's our desired result of email communication. We're going to move on next to the 4 W's of email communication, and this is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time on the webinar today. So within the 4 W's of email communication, again, we're going to start ourselves with the question to ourselves, is the best way to communicate this email? And if you answer your question is yes, that email is the best form of communication, now we're going to start going into our 4 W's. Why am I communicating? What needs to be communicated? When does this need to be communicated? And who needs to know this? So first, we have the why am I communicating? The best tool that we have to communicate the why I'm communicating is the subject line. This by far, and I'll just tell you all up front, that the subject line usage is one of my favorite ahas in all of this process. And I think it's been the one that's been the most successful within our organization, but I hope that this is successful for all of you as well. The email subject line is, what is the email about? This is the summary. Always enter in a subject. I'm sure you guys are all thinking about right now in your inbox how many emails are sorted at the bottom that don't have any subject line and you have no idea what they're about, and those are the ones you're procrastinating getting to. Deleting. Limit the subject line to the viewable subject line. So who uses the subject line as a chat function where they've got the whole book in the subject line? I'm going to go ahead and say it. My boss is guilty of it. She's retiring though, so I know she won't be offended if she's on the call today. Be very specific and concise in your subject line. Let people know exactly what it is and keep it brief. And then ultimately, if you need a response, this is one we'll show some examples in a few. You can state it right here in your subject line. Bottom line, though, your subject line may determine whether or not your email is read. I like to kind of give it or compare it to that fancy-looking book at Barnes & Noble that we all bought because it had a really cool cover on it. But then I dig in, and that's the one that I'm probably going to read. It's the one that has the ugly cover. It's probably not the one I'm actually going to buy. So your subject line is your pretty cover to your book. Let's go into some details looking at subject line. So the issue with continuing an email chain. I'm sure we've all seen this. We went on our lunch break or we went into a meeting and we came back and that email chain just kept flying and it's got that same subject line that's been going on. I know what I do in this circumstance. in this case, I'm going right up to Christy's email, and you can tell from my example here, I popped it open, I read about what was going on the email chain, and I deleted every other email that was in there. Sorry, Steve. Sorry, Sharon. Sorry, Pedro. Those emails are going away. And that's typically what happens. The challenge here is that we know with an email chain, sometimes the topics branch off, and sometimes there's what Sharon midway down here was talking about may not actually even be included in this chain up here with Christy. So let's use an example of what we could actually do to improve this. So here's an example where a meeting has actually been canceled, and hey, my subject line is fish frying. So again, I was buried back here. One of these middle emails that's going on that probably got deleted, but this is where the information got shared that the meeting got canceled. So in this case, what's something I could have done to actually improve the email? I changed my subject line. Meeting canceled for tomorrow, fish frying. So if this one is popped up down in that little sea of subject lines, this calls my attention that there's something actionable going on that I need to know about, and this isn't going to get lost in the mix. So using your subject line to fly out to the guest and let them know, or to your recipient, of why is the emails being communicated will flag their attention and make sure you don't get lost in the shuffle. There's other things that you can do within your subject line that will make them effective and get the attention of those who are receiving your emails. I have a few examples here. FYI only. This is something that I typically will send out to let people know that, hey, if this pops up in your inbox, there's really nothing actionable for you here to know. You know that you need to know this is going on. This is probably going to be a flag to someone that they don't need to do anything with it, and they can probably read this later on when it gets into this topic, or it had something to do with menu panels. I know what my involvement with menu panels is. I know that I can do this during my work from home day on Thursday, or this can wait until I go to the more pressing matters that are going on right now. Here's another one within our organization, performance appraisals. They're calling out process begins today. There's an actionable time frame here to let people know. If this pops up in their inbox and they see process begins today, that's a trigger that, hey, something's important here. It's performance appraisals. I need to jump right into it and start working on this thing. Here's another example, new procedure. For any of those, especially those of you who are in the restaurant biz or even within the hotels, those of you who have been in my sessions before, I don't have very good hotel examples. I apologize. So, new procedure, cutting dine-in burritos in half. If I was a hotel, maybe this is new procedure, better way to fold the sheets on the beds. All the hotel people are now rolling their eyes at me. That's okay. So again, this is a good one though, because this has the call to action that there's a new procedure, and they need to open and read this today. So this flags it in their inbox to let them know, hey, something's going on and I need to get going with it right away. This is another one, and this is pretty popular within our organization when you're talking to directors or executives or someone who's moving really fast and you need their info. So vote please, there's your call to action, and I need it by this time. And also I will usually give a little bit of brief idea so they know what it is, so that calls their attention. They know, hey, quick, I can just give an answer, A, B, C, whatever. So these are just a few examples of things that can be done in your subject line that will help explain the why you're communicating and call attention to your recipients. Now within subject lines, though, there's some what I call the party fouls. Not including a subject line, the vague subject line. So the vague subject line, use our example before where it said fish frying. Being more specific and call to an action, letting them know what needs to happen is going to help. Adding onto a message without changing the subject line or starting a new chain. Again, going back to our example of if something major happened here in this chain, like, hey, meeting's been canceled, we should probably call an action in the subject line so it doesn't get lost in the mix. So when somebody comes back from their break, they don't sort by subject line and delete everything and only get that last thing, and then that thing that trailed off totally got lost in the mix. So this has covered the why we're communicating and the tool that we can use being the subject line. Let's get into the core body and the text of the what am I communicating. What am I communicating? So some tools here. Use bullet points wherever possible. And this is where I'm going to get in, and for those of you who participate in different types of personality profiles, whether you use DISC assessments or like within Rubio's we use Insights or one of the other personality profiles, you're going to find in most of my details here that I'm going to be in the Insights world, it's the red energy, the be brief, be bright, be gone people. If I'm in the DISC world, I'm the Ds. These are the people that they want it short, they want it succinct, and to move fast. And generally speaking, what you're going to see today is that The majority of effective email communication does dabble in that world. That doesn't mean that we can't bring our other color energies or our other quadrants into our communications, but efficient communication tends to be, in this world of the 30 million emails flying constantly, you have to use these succinct methods to convey your information. So use bullet points wherever possible. Keep your email to one screen. Again, this calling to attention, if I don't have to read 4 pages, I'm probably not going to. Always type an overview when I'm including attachments. Especially if there's going to be 2 to 3 to 4 files, you always want to let the people who are going to be getting the email know, hey, here's what's in the attachment so they don't have to dig in. Because again, that's what's going to lead to things getting lost in the mix. And then more importantly, probably the most important thing you can do is if you need a response, give the specific date that you need the response by. So this is the one I always use the example, and I'm sure we can all identify with. You send that email off to somebody, and then all of a sudden you're rolling your eyes after 2 days, like, gosh, when are they going to respond to me? And if you will go walk at their desk, they say, oh, well, I was going to do that on Friday when I have my office time to get to my admin. Well, I need it by Wednesday. They're not mind readers. If we can actually let them know, give them that tool, and possibly even use the subject line to let them know when you need a response by, that gives them the tools in their arsenal to manage their time appropriately and get you their answer in time for you to be actionable with it. So another example, sound familiar? I don't know what to do about my XYZ problem. Thoughts, question mark? Dun, 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 dun. Usual response? Again, none. Let's look at a better example. To fix my XYZ problem, I'd like to try one of 2 options. I'd appreciate your option, it should be your opinion on which you think I should try first. ABC for those reasons, or do this for these reasons. So again, when you're given the body of the email, not just going and saying, hey, I need you to solve my problem, here it is. It's, hey, I'm reaching out to you via email. It's the, here's what I want to do, and here's why. Can you help me with these things? Being specific, and that gives the recipient an opportunity to read it fast and give you an answer. And this isn't to say that you're not going to be in these situations where, hey, frankly, I don't know what to do about my problem. Please help me. I think if you have subordinates on your team that are thinking they're in this position a lot, this is, again, that flag going all the way back to ask yourselves, is email the proper usage for this communication? Because if there's that time where somebody truly doesn't know what to do, that's when it's probably a phone call. That's probably when it's a meeting. But this is where we tend to be ineffective in our emails because we lean on using emails for these types of communications. So I'm going to give you an example here. It was an email I was about to send. I was going to send it to everybody. And in this case, we have an email group titled Everybody, and goes to 311 recipients. My subject line is important information, a little vague. On a clear sunny day, the sky above is blue, the evening, blah, blah, blah. Why is the sky blue? The answer to these questions, we must learn about light and the Earth's atmosphere. Goes on and on and on. Light waves, kind of light radiating, light wave this, electromagnetic that. I'm sure many of you are rolling your eyes right now because you probably have an email that looks something like this, but it's referring to restaurant procedures or hotel procedures. All the colors can be absorbed, blah, 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 blah. Did I really just write all of that information? Again, going back to our tools, we need to be succinct. We need to use our subject line appropriately. We need to make sure that we're not sending something that's 4 and 5 and 6 pages. Let's take a look at a better approach. I'm going to send the email to the person or persons who need this information. I'm only going to CC the people who may need to use it. And then my subject line, why is the sky blue? Answer enclosed. Nice and simple. Light reflected off the blue ocean makes the sky appear blue. That was the answer to the question that I posed in the prior example, but I used 3 pages to say it. Now, again, that's not to say that someone on this email chain may need all of those details about color spectrums and all those things. Attachments are the best place to put all that information. And again, I let them know for complete details, see attached. Let's see just a few other examples of some good uses of the body of email. Here's one. This is sent by our marketing group. Again, take a look at that subject line. Open and read today, gives you the highlights. There's an attachment there, and then when you take a look at her actual email, she gives an overview, a what, and to-do call to actions. Another area when it comes to the content of actual emails using technology, we throw this in here because what are some of the issues of using a smartphone for email? That's not to say we're not going to use them. We just want to make sure that in this world where more and more iPhones and smartphones and Droids and whatever examples out there are being used, there's some little faux pas and things that we could call to action for people. Messages are grouped together. It makes it more difficult to see a thread. Anybody who has an iPhone especially, that's what I have, you can see the groups are threaded together, so it's much harder to see, like when those email chains have multiple different legs on them, to get all the complete details. Your phone autocorrects spelling. We've probably all been a victim to this at one point or another. It's much different than on your computer, so autocorrecting is going to change what you're trying to say, and sometimes with hilarious consequences. Patrick, I'm looking at you. You may inadvertently use a tone that's not intended because of time and space limitations. Think about that. When you're sending an email from your phone, what are you doing? Hopefully not driving, but maybe you're in a theme park in Orlando, or you're headed into a meeting and you're trying to give an answer really fast and you're not intending to be rude or abrupt, but mistakenly you accidentally say something that in a tone that you didn't mean. So what are some of the ways that we can avoid these? Again, when we think about messages being grouped together, take a look at your chain. Is this something that is turning into a big conversation? Maybe that's when I do a reply all and say, hey everyone, this is a detailed topic and clearly we're all out and about. How about we schedule a meeting on this date to go into this? Or is everyone available at 3 p.m. today for a phone call? Looking at your autocorrects, just like on your emails, taking just a little bit of extra time to go back and read it before you send it. Trying to differentiate between an email and a text is it's a really big thing to actually do, because in text, again, that's usually when you're talking to Nana. A couple typos isn't a really big deal, but these are organizational emails that are sometimes going to quite a few people. If you're using your smartphone, you have to ask yourself, is this the right form to be using that? My funny anecdote that I'll share from a team member on my group, that I don't think she's on the call today, so I won't call her out, but she was sending an email about shift leaders. So I think within most of our organizations we have shift leaders. Unfortunately, her phone auto-corrected and removed the F from shift leaders. That didn't pan out too well for her. So I guarantee you from this day forward, anytime she uses the word shift in any of her emails or text message or iPhone messages, she makes sure that it's spelled correctly. And ultimately that inadvertently using the incorrect tone. Think about the recipient. Think about who's going to be getting this message. Is it someone on your team? Do you feel like you're being short to them? Think about, is the using of the technology the right time and place to be using it? Or is this a time that maybe I should close that email app and click on the phone app and just pop them over a phone call to talk about the topic? Email party fouls within the body of the email and in the message. Using email when another communication method would be better. Again, pick up that phone, send that text message, maybe a chat, maybe it's time for a meeting. Not considering your tone when you're sending a message. Again, thinking about those DISC profiles, those insights profiles, or just a personality that you're aware of. Just not considering the tone that you're using them. Sometimes it's you type that email, take a quick break, come back and look at it again, and you can read it for the fresh set eyes, and you can see, oh, maybe I need to reword it just a little bit to send the right tone. Thoughts, question mark? Dun, 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 dun. I am raising my hand right now to tell you that this is one of my biggest pet peeves. Again, it's not to say that we never need to have a discussion, but thoughts, question mark? That is a trigger for a conversation that either should happen via phone or possibly in an in-person meeting. The non-specific, let's discuss. So let's discuss when? Let's discuss via email or let's discuss in person? Let's discuss on phone. When's best for you? Being more specific will help you with that. And then lastly, not proofreading your messages, especially when they're sent from the phone. Making sure those shift leaders are always called shift leaders, even though they're getting shift done. So we've covered our first two W's. We've got our whys and our whats. Let's move into our when does this need to be communicated. Now, I've kind of hit on this briefly already, but making sure that you're actually building in the time for the people to get the work done when they need it. So ask yourselves, are you getting the information to the people who need it either before or at least when they need it by? This is ultimately going to lead you down to build in time for the reader to review, take action, and reply. Now, my full disclosure here, I think we all know that none of us have a crystal ball. None of us will necessarily always know what's going on in someone's world. But you are, as the sender of that email, likely the subject matter expert on that particular topic. So you should have a general understanding of what amount of time should go into that type of a topic. So is it a quick reply, something that they can get an answer to? You may say to yourself, hey, this is something they could answer in 2 minutes. Okay, that's cool. But do they have 2 minutes right now? So ask yourself that question and think about what's going on in your organization. And again, lean on that subject line. Let them know. Quick question, need reply by end of day. If it's something that maybe needs a week from now is when you need it by, say that in your email again. And here's the example I throw out there is I sent an email on a Friday. I have my call to action and say I need a vote and I need it by end of day Wednesday. I'm building in enough time that they can have an opportunity to either see in the subject line that they need to get to it by then, or at least that at least gives them an opportunity to see right away when they're swamped in emails to browse their subject lines and say, hey, Gabe, you know what? I am touring restaurants between now and Wednesday of next week. I can't get it to you by Thursday. And maybe that's when I say, hey, let me talk to you on the phone real quick, and maybe I can get your answer as a proxy to you sending me an email. So again, just keeping in mind, when do you need a response by, and making sure you're communicating that to that end user. Go back to my example before when they're standing in your doorway, tapping their foot saying, come on, it's Wednesday. Aren't you going to reply to my email? And you think, oh, well, I was, but I wasn't going to do it till Thursday when I had built in my admin time. Making sure that you build in the time and convey that to your end user. So we covered the why and the what and the when. Let's talk about the who. Who needs to know this information in your emails? And again, this is probably going to be one of the biggest ones that I'll say you need to make this work in your organization, but these are some general best practices of what really works for me. In your to line, this is who you need to communicate, or more importantly, you need a response from. If the person's in the to box, that means this is something actionable, and that's the person that owns responding to this email. Your CC list, this is the FY only people. Frankly, I don't ever even expect a response for that person, and here's my legitimate person just saying, they may not even read it. If they're in the CC box, that means I'm not expecting any action from them. They may need the information, but I'm not going to expect a response from them. And lastly is the BCC list. I frankly say we only ever use this when it's announced. And you're probably pondering and your head just tilted. What does only when announced mean? I'm going to show you guys an example in just a second, but the BCC list is actually something we've embraced in our organization, but using it as something that we use to announce it to manage email chains, not to hide something we're trying to pass off to someone else. But again, ultimately remind yourself that our goal is to exchange information and break the chain. If there's 40 people on an email chain and they're all in the to box, are you ready to get responses from all 40 of those people? Probably not. So I said using that BCC list, I'm going to take a look here at a little example here. And I know you guys aren't familiar within my organization, but there's one person missing from this chain. For whatever reason, they accidentally didn't get on it, but it's like the one person or two people that can actually make a difference to this. So somebody tags on to this email and says, adding Steve. Steve's our guy, and Steve's the guy that can fix this. And oh, by the way, Catalina, she goes by Kathy, is the other person that we need to work on this project, and there's so many other people on here that are not part of the working chain that are going to work to get a solution. They may need to know about this, but they don't need to get roped in for the ride for all of the working back and forth. So this is an area where we actually use BCC. So you can see right here this person says, I'm removing most of you from this chain via BCC. You'll be looped back in when and if this is appropriate. And if you look, Steve and Kathy have got some specific information. So this is where as the owner of a chain, when I see that there's tons of people on this, there's executives, there's all these people, and there's going to be some back and forth working dialogue on this email chain, that they need to know that maybe something's going on, but they don't need to be back and forth, and oh, by the way, they're going to chime in with their 2 cents here and there. This is a great opportunity to say, I'm going to pull all of you guys all off the chain. I'm letting you know that I'm taking you off the chain, and I'm also letting you know that you have an opportunity to find out at the very end, and I'll circle back with you. And of course, that person can reply back and say, hey, you know what, I actually need to be part of this working discussion. But if you look back down there, the tech support people, the Ricardo, and all those other people who don't really need to be, well, Ricardo's a bad example. He isn't the CC boss. Chris, they don't need to be back and forth on the back and forth working in dialogue. We're going to pull them off. They know work's getting done, and they know that they'll know at the very end, but we're going to use BCC to pull them off of that chain. Email party fouls when it comes to your address line. Things that you can do that are a party foul, and Gabe back in his office going, womp, womp. Putting too many people in the CC line on a working chain. So again, we differentiate. Sometimes, again, it's just an FYI, but this is, again, something that's going to be, hey, there's going to be lots of back and forth. This is where I typically throw out where you're CCing someone's supervisor, someone's boss. We lean on that CC for that reason. But again, does that person's boss, in my case, my boss knows what I'm working on, but they do not need to do my job for me, and they don't need to be on all my working back and forth. I'll send them a forward and say, hey, FYI, this is going on. I'll loop you at the very end. But of using those CC lines and having 40 people on it, that's what it creates that creep in your email chains, because there's so many people involved that don't really need to be a part of the dialogue. They just need to know something initially is going on, and then they're done with it. Abuse of email groups. So I don't know about everyone else's organizations, but in my company, we literally have an email group titled Everybody. Thankfully, it does not get used that often. But within your groups, you probably have department email groups, your working team email groups, project team email groups, and sometimes people will lean on those, and all of a sudden you look at it, you're like, oh, hang on a second, we've included the IT group, the ops group, the training group, the finance group, when really only one stakeholder in that, our department, actually needs to be on this chain and get the FYI. You know, within my ops services team, there's 7 of us on this team, and we have 7 people that do 7 different jobs. That email group gets used by me when I'm talking to my whole team, and that's about it. But people will use that and say, oh, I'll just include the ops services email group, so ops services knows, and all of a sudden 7 people on the group get the info when really only 1 person, and in some cases maybe 2 people get that information that actually need it. Using unannounced BCC. Let's just be above board and raise our hands here and say, if it's something that somebody needs to know, let's be above board about it. If it truly is something that needs to be forwarded on to someone that maybe a supervisor needs to know about, you really should send that as a separate email or a forward. The big faux pas and the problem with using BCC as well, other than just, frankly, I think it's underhanded in some cases, well, let's take that out of it. Let's just say someone's innocently saying, hey, I'm going to loop in a supervisor. That supervisor may not always know that they're in the BCC box. And so when they accidentally hit reply because they thought that they were supposed to be replying to the email, all of a sudden the veil has been lifted and everybody says, oh, oops, Gabe BCC'd this person. How did they even know we were having this conversation? And it just creates some animosity across teams that really shouldn't happen. Some more party fouls. Thoughts, question mark? Non-specific, let's discuss. In our topics, so we've covered our desired results of email communication, and we've gone through our 4 W's of email communication. Again, our why, what, when, and who. And if anyone's feverishly trying to keep track of all the W's, all of this is going to be available on the Chart website once we're done today, so don't feel like you need to be getting writer's cramp as we're going along. So let's go into our next topic, responding to email. These last few topics you're going to see are very much kind of the backwards direction of a lot of the topics we've already been covering so far. So again, using ourselves as a little example here and using your 4 W's, email example. I would like to do, insert idea here, during the summer for XYZ reason. Are you good with moving forward? Your email response, let's discuss. We're responding back to them, let's be a little better. Let's say, let's discuss. I have a different idea in mind I want to talk to you about. Please call me on my cell phone about 3 p.m. today. Again, being specific in your responses, in this case you're saying, hey, I want to have a dialogue about this. Let's discuss, but here's let's discuss when. I think I've been the perfect example of I've been a faux pas here. I send it to my team. I say, I'll send them an email, say, I want to talk to you about this. Give me a call, right? Now, they're not going to get to my email right that minute. So while I'm ready to have the discussion right now, they call me 4 hours from now when I happen to be in a meeting, and now it's not a great use of my time because I can't dedicate the time to them, and also they don't actually have the time either, so now they have to reschedule. So being more specific to actually help them, and we can schedule a specific time for that discussion. Effective responses. Again, these are some tools when you're responding to an email. Use your 4 W's as well. Answer all questions and provide the information requested. Boy, how frustrating is it when you send an email, you ask 4 questions, and the person replies back with that one sentence response, likely from their phone, and they answered your first question, and now you have to reply back, okay, cool, thank you so much. How about the other 3 questions that I have? So taking the time when you're effectively responding to an email to ensuring you're answering all the questions. Provide attachments or links as needed, but again, always include a brief description of what you're providing. When somebody on my team says, hey, I'm looking for a report on this and I'm looking for a report on that, I'm going to send it back because I've got access to those 4 Excel files and those 3 PDFs. But when I reply back in respect of their time, I'm not going to click through each one of those for them. I'm going to give them a bullet point of, hey, graph number 1 explains that employee retention question you had. Graph number 2 has the ROI for that training program you were asking me about. And graph number 3 has that cool picture of how cool I am. I really hope people are laughing at me right now. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that you all are. And lastly, I have to throw this one in here in effective email responses that, in fact, our HR department said to throw in here. Do not forward jokes, articles, or pictures that are not work-related. Again, remember my disclaimer at the very beginning. These are just best practices and sometimes the things HR tells me I have to do. They're very proud of me right now. I'll just go ahead and tell you guys all right now, @GabeHostler, Twitter handle. By all means, I love jokes, articles, and pictures that are not work-related there. So going into your responses, again, those party fouls. And again, some of these are going to be very reminiscent of topics we've already covered so far. Thoughts, question mark, dun, 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 dun. Non-specifics, let's discuss. Again, if I'm responding and I need to discuss this with you, hey, let's discuss. Let's talk about it at this time. Are you available at the RSC that day? Adding people back when they were removed from an email chain. Again, if you have somebody has the best intentions and they're trying to clean up an email group because they want to make sure that it's the working team that's effective, but you keep tacking that supervisor back on the email chain, if in fact you think, hey, you know what, Gabe's on this email chain and Patrick's not, but Patrick keeps getting cut back off and Patrick should be included on this one, add that person back, but actually say, hey, I'm adding Patrick back into this chain because Patrick knows about that ROI discussion we're going to have, or whatever. Just tacking them back on, but they keep getting pulled back off. Just think about that poor person's inbox. If they need to be on it, get them on there and make sure everybody knows why they need to be on there. If they got pulled off because the owner of that email chain pulled them off, then we can respect that. And maybe it's time for a quick text or phone call of, hey, you keep cutting Patrick off. Is there a reason? And they can say, oh, yeah, you know what? I already talked to Patrick offline, and he already forwarded me the ROI thing, and he's in meetings for the rest of the day, so that's why I keep pulling him off. Cool. Again, using that effective communication to ensuring that we're not crowding inboxes with more information that needs to happen. And then using the dreaded reply all when not needed. I know, and unfortunately within many organizations and within some departments in my building, HR, that reply all button seems to be the only button on their email. They don't have that reply only button. So using reply all when it's truly not needed. And again, when you look at an email and you say it's time to reply, I'm the person that needs to do the call to action. Think to yourself, is everyone that's on this email chain everyone that needs to be on this discussion? Sometimes the answer is going to be yes. Sometimes the answer is going to be no because it's a working chain, but not using the reply all button when it's not needed. So we've covered a bulk of our topics. We've covered our desired result of email communication. We've gone into our 4 W's of email communication. Again, our why, what, when, and who. And we've also talked about responding to email. Another short topic is getting an answer to your email. This is going to be a real brief one. What if I still don't get responses? Gabe, I've done everything I can. I've been effective. I followed all the protocol, and I'm an effective communicator. Now what? Go back. First and foremost, and this is going to be the biggest one, ensure that your original email included when you needed to receive a response by. I can tell you in talking to my team and talking to members within our organization that 9 times out of 10, this is one of the biggest mistakes. We say, hey, can you get me this info? I don't ever tell them when I EFI, so they're going to do it when they have time to get it done. They don't know that I need it by Wednesday. So they might be doing it on Thursday. So going back and ensuring that your email actually included when you needed the info by. Okay, you're still not getting a response. Forward your email again asking for an answer. Include the date you need the answer if you forgot to do so in the original email. As a last resort, include others in the CC line. I know that sometimes we lean on that supervisor, and we're going to need to do it sometimes. I think there's always effective times for it. But again, this is a last resort. I don't think anybody likes to be micromanaged, but when that supervisor is just the go-to, hey, I always include their boss because they always reply to me, then you got to think to yourself, maybe there's possibly a better form of communication when you're talking to that person. So again, going back to ask yourself one of our very first question of the who we're talking to, maybe there's a better form of communication for that person. Maybe the drive-by, stop by their office is the better way to get the answer from them. Maybe the phone call, maybe the text for those millennials, maybe a chat function if your organization has that. Bottom line, though, that we have to ask ourselves or say to ourselves is that you own getting an answer. The recipient's lack of response is not an excuse to not get the job done. I'm sure out there's some nodding heads that people, if you've heard from somebody on your team or somebody within your organization, you ask them for the info and they say, oh, well, I sent it off, they just haven't responded to me. Well, you're the one that needs the information, so you own getting that answer. So first, follow the protocol. Did you do all the things to get the email as effectively out to that person as possible? If you did all those steps, you did the forward, you did your last resort, and you're still not getting the answer, that's still when you pick up the phone. And boy, that's typically when you find out, oh, they were on vacation and they forgot to set their out of office. Or, you know what, they just are swamped and they didn't even get to my email because I did all the right things, but it was still buried. But you know what, they can get me the answer right away. But the point is, the person owning the email, as the owner, you own getting that answer. You got to reach out to the person using another tool if you have to. So all of these things, we have our desired result of email communication. Our 4 W's are why, what, when, and who, how to effectively respond to email, and how to get an answer. I'm going to close this out today. We're going to have our E-commitment. Yes, I know I referenced Bill Clinton in the beginning, and this guy kind of looks like Joe Biden. I promise I'm not getting political with anybody, but he was the Google image guy when I said I wanted an E-commitment. So our E-commitment today, that we're going to look at ourselves and we're going to stand up and put our hands over our hearts. We're going to say, I commit to using the 4 W's when I communicate via email. I think before I hit send. I respond to others' emails the way that I want them to respond to me. Doesn't that sound like that golden rule when you were the kid on the recess? Do unto others. When I don't get the response I need, I own getting an answer. And what do we say right at the very beginning? What's our goal with email communication? Our goal is to exchange information and break the chain. I want to thank everybody today for taking time to spend with me here on our webinar. I hope everyone had an opportunity to get some great aha moments on here. I'm going to pass it back to Patrick to take us home.
Well, Gabe, we do have well, first of all, I should say I'm very guilty of the thoughts, so I will stop doing that. And we do have a couple of questions here for you. Do you find that this short style or short, succinct communication can be off-putting for some who look for more detail and personality to emails?
So you're talking about people who possibly don't fall into that D category in DISC or the red energy insights people. You know, it goes back to, as the sender, you need to think about who your recipient is. And I know it sounds really silly, but when I send the emails, when I know I'm sending it to that person on my team that they are the show me you care people, that's where I put a little more smileys in there. Or I'll lead off by, hope you're doing well. So sometimes there's little tactics that you can throw in there, but again, it's just making sure that you know who your end user is and you're using some extra little tools to be effective for that particular person. But generally speaking, organizational communication is going to lead more towards that short, succinct style of communication. And again, sometimes taking advantage of those other mechanisms like picking up the phone, giving that person a phone call. Just yesterday, I was talking to one of our general managers that was very passionate about a particular ingredient topic, gluten-free items. And I knew that the very specific corporate response wasn't going to really set well for that person. So I popped on the phone with her and I did the, hey, you know what, I totally get where you're coming from, and here's the position that we're in, and here's why. And that's where typically it works, using those other mechanisms for communication.
Okay, good. I liked a few of your tips, especially the one about the subject line to have a call to action, but I'm concerned not all of these best practices will work in my organization. How would you recommend I get them to stick?
Well, Patrick, have anyone ever asked you how you eat an elephant? You do it one bite at a time. And that's why I would go back to your organization and take a lot of these tips. And again, all these things will be available on the CHART website later. But pick a few of the ones that you think will be the most effective and take them back to your group and try to go individual. Use your situational leadership skills and say, hey, I know the guy that never uses subject lines, and this is the guy that never gets a response. I'm going to go and give him this one little tidbit. So taking these little pieces, and just like I said at the very beginning, they're best practices. You're going to find some things that may or may not work in your organization, and that's okay. If you can just walk away today with just a few, I can guarantee you're going to have some more effective communication within your organization.
Okay. And the last one, sometimes for sensitive communications from our HR department, we use the blind carbon copy line to avoid accidental reply all with sensitive information. Is this wrong?
So okay, so you're saying it's when they send out, I think sometimes it's a healthcare thing, or it's a let people know that something's going on, but you don't want somebody to accidentally reply all with their doctor's information or things like that. And I would say that's a good example of a good example of using the BCC line. And the example we said earlier was always use it when it's announced, and I'd say that's an example of it kind of is announced. When they look at their inbox, they can see nobody's in the two box, or only one person is, but they know that other people got it. So you're using it as announced. But again, going back to my original point that these are best practices, there's going to be some times where you're going to use these tools and you may not always use it as announced, but I think that's a great example of what fits best for the situation and you're using it right.
Well, good. Well, I'd like to thank you, Gabe, for your time and your presentation. I certainly got an entire list of things here that I'm going to start using in my emails, which tend to be really long, as you so nicely pointed out to everybody. We do have a couple more slides, I think, in the presentation about other ways that folks can get involved with CHART. There we go. We have future webinars coming up this year. Again, it's the second Wednesday of every other month, so we have them scheduled for June 10th, August 12th, October 14th, and December 9th. We also have our 90th semi-annual hospitality training conference coming up in New Orleans. You can already register on their website. It's chart.org, and all the information there about the sessions and the great speakers that we're going to have it's already up on the website, and people are registering now. It's coming up in July 18th through the 21st. And then, of course, as Gabe, if you would like to talk about the regional training forums, since they're sort of your baby right now.
They're absolutely my baby. So one of the greatest ways you can participate with CHART throughout the year outside of our webinars and our biannual conferences is our regional training forums. So these take place across the country, and right now we actually have 8 of them on the calendar. So take a look here. You can also visit our CHART website. We call these are mini networking events, and each RTF is a little bit different. Sometimes it'll be just that. It's a mini networking event. I know we just recently had one with Kirsty Johnson out in Dallas. She did just a small get-together. It was like 2 hours long to bring the local network together to talk about little topics. We've got one coming up in Southern California that I like to call it our mini conference style. We actually have guest speakers coming in. But ultimately, these are all just more great ways for you to get together with the CHART members in your area and even non-members. If you're in the area and you'd like to bring a member of your team that's not a member of CHART, it's always a great opportunity to bring them in.
Indeed it is. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and thank you, Gabe, for your presentation. I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone.